Hello and welcome to a conversation with the Middle East Monitor. My name is Nassim Ahmed and I will be your host today. We are discussing an extremely important report by the European Legal Support Center, an independent organization defending and empowering Palestine solidarity movement in Europe through various legal means. The title of the report is Suppressing Palestinian Rights Advocacy through the IHRA Working Definition of Anti-Semitism. The report is the first in-depth analysis of the real-life impact of the highly controversial definition of anti-Semitism, as I said, known as the IHRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition. Since at least 2016, there has been a desperate attempt to install the IHRA at the heart, at the center of regulatory frameworks across Europe, which crack down on critics of Israel under the guise of combating anti-Semitism. So we'll be looking at the organizations behind this campaign, the history of the IHRA, and asking what impact it is having on the lives of people. I'm joined by the director of the European Legal Center, Giovanni Fassina. Giovanni is the overseas legal team, is the head of the overseas legal team and the strategic litigation cases at the European Legal Center. Previously, he trained as a lawyer in Italy, specializing in cases related to mass torts litigation, business and human rights, and civil liability before domestic courts and the European Court of Human Rights. He also worked for many years in the development sector in the Occupied Palestinian Territories. Thank you for joining us, Giovanni, and it's really great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Nazim, for inviting me and the organization to join this session. Thank you so much.
Yes, I mean, when I was reading it, the report, much of what you discovered is what did not surprise me. We know there's been an ongoing effort to, as I said, install the IHRA at the center of regulatory frameworks. Various European countries, EU, have adopted this. Thankfully, I think last month, the US revealed its plan for combating anti-Semitism, and the IHRA was not a prominent feature. It did not feature in the way many feared it would have. It was only mentioned once with other definitions of anti-Semitism, which does not conflate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. So that was a good thing. And this week also the UN postponed its meeting about how it will combat anti-Semitism, and there's disagreements over the role of the IHRA. I think many pro-Israeli organizations were angry at the fact that the UN was not adopting the IHRA in the way they wanted, put the IHRA at the heart and center of its plan to combat anti-Semitism. So which again, it seems optimistic, but we don't know what will happen in the end. So yours is one of the first reports, and it really is something I felt that's needed to understand what's happening on the ground with pro-Palestinian activism and how the IHRA is suppressing free speech. So let's begin with some of the key findings of your report, if you can go through, and then we'll dig deeper and look at the history of the IHRA.
Sure.
Life impact.
Absolutely. But first, I also like to say that, our is the first type of report of this kind, but it's also important to stress that we've been heavily inspired by the work of Palestine Legal in the United States. In 2015, they issued an amazing report about repression in US campuses, and they have also an amazing website where they show exactly how TPDS motion and IHRA is implemented in the United States. So for us, Palestine Legal has been really a huge source of inspiration for this work and in general for our organization. So when it comes to, the key findings are that, first of all, like the IHRA is implemented by both public and private bodies as it was law. So the brand non-legally binding actually doesn't apply, that doesn't really work, because we see that when it becomes a policy, these policies are implemented. Despite the fact that there might be other regulations, conflicting regulation or conflicting norms, So also the implementation of the IHRA, the IHRA is implemented in a way that curtail freedom of expression and assembly. And this, what we see is kind of normal, because the IHRA is such a vague text that people just don't understand it, and therefore they're applying it kind of automatically, okay? And because the text is very confused, these curtail freedom of expression on assembly, because this leads to self-censorship, and we also explain that these foster anti-Palestinian racism. Of course, so the third finding is that we, of course, advocates for Palestinian rights who are targeted face a range of unjust and harmful consequences, including loss of employment and reputational damages. And also what we documented is that the allegation of anti-Semitism that use the IHRA definition are targeting mainly Palestinians, Jewish, and organizations that advocate for Palestinian rights, and suggesting that the IHRA is implemented in a discriminatory manner. And then our last finding is that it's clear that the European Union has consistently ignored, if not denied any concern and warning expressed by civil society actors, Jewish organization, and human rights organization about the negative impact of the definition. So I would say these overall are the main funding. And just to specify something also, what is interesting, what we saw is that the IHRA can be used basically in three ways. We see, we can have public bodies using it in their internal policies, okay? And we have cases about this. We have private bodies as well implementing it internally, but also we see IHRA is used mainly in smear campaign. So we have third parties accusing someone of anti-Semitism and just pointing out, referring to the IHRA, and just the reference to the IHRA make the allegation credible, right?
And we see that in so many different places, the three ways in which IHRA is being used. One of the qualifications the advocates of the IHRA used to say in defending the IHRA, as you mentioned, they say it's non-legally binding. And as your report finds, discover that that's not the case. It's being used as though it's law, and therefore undermining other higher principles in European systems, like the freedom of expression, and many people, as you mentioned, we will get to the case studies, are being sacked, are losing their jobs, are thrown out of universities because of this definition, which is supposedly not legally binding, but it's used as though it's legally binding. And online as well, you see so many pro-Israeli organizations under the name of combating anti-Semitism. They will say, oh, this human rights organization, such and such a person, has called Israel an apartheid state. According to IHRA, this is anti-Semitism, and therefore he needs to be, cancelled. He needs to be this. So they'll always cite the IHRA as the reason why they're calling such and such a person anti-Semitic, and it's a very dangerous path to go onto. I mean, and we'll look into that. But I think one of the things that will help us understand why the IHRA is so dangerous, I would say, and is a threat to free speech, is to look at the history itself, the history of the IHRA, how it came to be as important it is, and how it's being pushed by so many institutions in Europe. So give us a bit of the historical background to how the IHRA came to be and why it's seen as the standard by pro-Israeli organizations.
Yeah, well, we would say that the IHRA is the result of a concerted effort underway since a few decades by individuals and organizations to indeed redefine anti-Semitism in ways that deflect and silences criticism of Israel. And on this, I would 100% defer the audience to read the important book of Anthony Lerman, which is called Whatever Happened to Anti-Semitism, because Anthony Lerman in his books explains very, very well, very, very clearly what is the process behind the redefinition, reconceptualization of this new anti-Semitism paradigm. Okay. So basically, this is very, very well explained in his book. But long story short, this concerted effort by many pro-Israeli organizations ended up when they approached the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which is like an organization, and they convinced them to adopt this new definition. Now, the definition per se is not a problem. The definition is fine. The issue of the definition are the examples, because there are 11 examples attached to the definition. These examples, in theory, they should be read into context, right? This never happened, by the way. And the two main problematic examples are the example 7, where they say, denying the Jewish people the right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. And that's why when people call Israel an apartheid state, this in theory could fall into this definition. And then also example 8, where they say applying double standards by requiring of Israel a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. This is indeed extremely confusing. What is this double standard eventually?
I mean, if I can come in on that, what for a Palestinian, what would that mean? Holding Israel to a higher standard, or focusing on Israeli crimes? For a Palestinian being occupied, they have to, of course, point to Israel. They're not going to say China did this, Russia did this. We are subjected to an apartheid system. For the Palestinians to say, Israel is subjugating us, and therefore this is an indication of anti-Semitism. It's really bizarre. Who else should the Palestinians boycott? Who else should the Palestinians point to? So, just on that, I think this double standard is such a strange thing to introduce in a definition of anti-Semitism.
No, I fully agree with you. I fully agree with you, and that's why this is so problematic, because indeed these, as you are saying correctly, like these make it really difficult or even impossible for Palestinians to tell about their own story and discuss also their identity. So your point of view is constantly constrained into making comparison, because if you don't make comparison, then you're not credible. Like, doesn't make any sense, I would say. But also there is another example, which is example 10, we say drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. And we saw in practice that this example has been used very often every time people are pointing out to crimes that Israeli authorities are committing. As soon as you highlight how many people have been killed or injured or tortured in detention, you don't even have to invoke any reference to what happened with the Nazi regime, but that is enough, for triggering this example. We saw this in many cases, I would say.
Can you talk a little bit about what happened initially in 2003-04 when there was an attempt to introduce the IHRA definition, but it was rejected. It was rejected outright because of the examples where they conflate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. So there was a rejection, and then it returned back again. I think it was 2016. So what happened there?
No, basically what happened was that indeed, like, they tried to convince there used to be the European Monitoring Center on Race and Xenophobia, EUMC, which then became Fundamental Rights Agency, FRA. So initially they tried to convince the European body to adopt the definition, right? Because when you have such an important institution adopting the definition, that paves the way for an international endorsement and adoption at the European level, also international level, So that I would say that advocacy, that lovely activity failed, because indeed they rejected it, and that's why then they moved to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. It's an international organization. It's not like an institution, I would say. But it has some, of course, credibility and legitimacy, and that's why we moved there, because they didn't manage to convince the Fundamental Rights Agency. And then when they went to the International Workers' to the IHRA, to this institution, they convinced them basically. But also there, like again, also on this, I would really suggest to read Jamie Bernstein. He's a PhD at Oxford University. He wrote extensively on this topic. And in his article, he explained very well how they managed to convince, the IHRA to adopt this new definition by basically hiding the examples. Jamie explains very well that when I adopted the IHRA, actually the example were not part of it. They just adopted the definition, not the example, but then they managed to basically brand this as definition example were all together,
Yeah. That's always been the confusing thing about the IHRA. Are the examples part of the definition or not? And as you said, it was kind of introduced through the back door, but then it's remained, and pro-Israeli organization will insist it's part of the definition. But of course, that's where all the issue lies, not the actual one paragraph, which is very similar to what the US has adopted and many other organizations. It's the examples. And of course, the other one, which you mentioned in your report, is the idea that it's non-legally binding. As we know, that's just a phrase that's put in there, but essentially the real life example is that it's being used as though it has legal force. And the European Union is really behind a lot of that. And I'm wondering, I mean, you touched on that in your report. I mean, were there any risk assessment carried out, conducted by the European Union of the impact IHRA would have on fundamental values and rights, which we all supposedly have, human rights and freedom of expression. So were there any risk assessment studies done in advance?
No, nothing at all. Law for Palestine and another NGO, they file a freedom of information request requesting if there was any human rights assessment, and the European Union, like Commission, they didn't provide them with any document. Which shows that no, there was no any kind of human rights assessment. So they didn't do it. And of course, when we met the commissioner, when we met the EU Commissioner on Fight Against Anti-Semitism, and we asked her about this, she said, well, this was not needed because indeed it's not legally binding. So if it's not legally binding, why we need to do a risk human rights assessment? But again, this shows also she lied, because in previous tweets, she actually admitted that, yeah, they did this kind of assessment, and no, nothing was.
The interesting tweet, done. Which we provide link to, the tweets there where the commissioner clearly says that we did carry out risk assessment, and then it turns out there was no risk assessment.
No, there was no risk assessment, but also like the European Union, like 2 years ago, they started a process for developing a strategy for fighting anti-Semitism. During that process, many Jewish anti-Zionist organizations, or even Jewish organizations just advocating for Palestinian rights, they sent many submissions expressing their concerns and saying, like, we think this definition is problematic. Also for us as a Jewish community, because we think we're restricted in what we can or we cannot say. And all these concerns were never taken into consideration. Nothing, zero. Like in the final strategy, there is not even one reference to their submission of what they said, even if they made many of these submissions, and they tried to meet with the commissioner many times. So not even no human rights concern, but also there never been any, I mean, all the engagements that have been with Jewish advocates for Palestinian rights have been completely dismissed. That's our experience so far.
So let's look at some of the case studies. I mean, I interviewed you, I think, last year sometime regarding a case in Germany where a journalist was dismissed because of her support for Palestine. But that's just tip of the iceberg. I mean, your report covers a number of case studies. So give us a sense of, what is the size of the impact it is having on supporters of Palestine what kind of impact it's having. I think your report looks at something like 50 or so case studies.
Yeah, 56.
Yeah, so give us an indication of some of the case studies and what's happening on the ground, real life, when it comes to crackdown and suppression.
Yeah. Well, I would connect this with what I was telling before about, how the IHRA works in practice. So we have on one side cases where people are smeared with allegation of anti-Semitism using the IHRA, and because of the smear, they can be disinvited from events or lose their job. Like, let's take the case in Austria of Wala Al-Qassia. Wala Al-Qassia is a Palestinian scholar. She was invited by the Academy of Fine Arts of Vienna within a festival to give a speech, and the speech was around Zionism. And the Union of Jewish Students sent a letter to the dean of the faculty saying, well, Al-Qassia is an anti-Semite according to IHRA definition, and she supports BDS because BDS is anti-Semitic, so you should disinvite her. And point blank, they did it. they did it immediately. You see, so this is a clear example, on how the IHRA can be used. On these specific cases, it's also important to say though that after this happened, there was a huge mobilization among scholars, academics, and activists, and many people reached out to other people who were supposed to speak at this event, and they all withdrew their participation in solidarity with Wala. And after this, the whole event was not even hosted anymore by the Academy of Vienna. It was hosted in a different venue, because they refused to let's say, to host a venue in a place that was complicit on this. It's important to stress this as well. In other cases, well, first of all, like in Germany and Austria, let's speak about it. In Germany and Austria, what we saw that there are many resolutions that unfoundedly are conflating the BDS movement as anti-Semitic. They are based on the IHRA working definition. Like in Germany, the motion adopted by the German parliament is recalling the IHRA definition in its preamble. And even when they are not recalling the IHRA definition explicitly, it really falls in the same narrative, are basically the same words. It's the same concept, I would say. So these resolutions in Germany and Austria have been a huge impact in violating the rights of freedom of expression and assembly. In Germany, so many events have been cancelled because of these motions. And also, it's important to stress that right now there is a group of activists called Bundestag BD3P, who are suing the German parliament, and there's going to be a court hearing tomorrow, by the way. So in Germany and Austria, this is what we saw. Like, there are parliaments adopting this motion, recalling the IHRA, and then when you want to rent a room for organizing a space, or when you're doing an application for funds, these are denied on the light of the fact of these motions. So again, these motions in theory are not legally binding. Yes, of course, but you can see that the public authorities actually take them very seriously. Also, we have a case in Austria where, like, a private body, which was, I think, a school of language, I don't recall the name exactly, like they were supposed to give a room to a group of activists for organizing an event, and then they say, no, we cannot give this room to you, and they say, even if we are private institutions, these motions are legally binding for us. And they wrote it in an email. We have a correspondence, you see, and it didn't matter if of course we told them, well, this is not true, you're not obliged. They say, we don't care, for us this is absolutely relevant. And then when it comes to the UK, in the UK, there are two main, I mean, I would discuss two cases, I would say. The first case is about UK universities. On the one side, we saw that in many universities adopted the IHRA. And after the adoption, we saw many complaints of anti-Semitism, where people were targeting the students and academics who are very active, especially on social media. And they were merely referring to what they posted, shared, liked, and saying this like is anti-Semitic according to this example, this other like anti-Semitic to this other example. And this enough trigger disciplinary procedure. The disciplinary procedure means our mini trial, right?
Yeah.
Like you are called, you have to do an interview, then a second interview, you have a panel who will decide, you have to provide evidence. Thanks to our legal support, we won all the cases and the complaints were dismissed, but this lasted for really, really long. So we saw this another example, you know, like the policy enshrined within disciplinary procedures bring to this. And the last case I wanna discuss, we had this person who they were offered a job in a public institution. And then this institution told them, well, we check your social media, and in our opinion, your social media is anti-Semitic according to the IHRA. We adopted the IHRA, and this tweet, this other tweet, or this like are anti-Semitic. Can you imagine? Like what? So I think it's clear what we're talking about, right?
Non-legally binding, and you end up sacking people based on a definition which is legally binding.
I mean, in that case, again, like thanks to our intervention, they got the job back because we threatened litigation, which is really good on the one side. On the other side, this is scary. This is really scary because people should not always refer to legal support or threaten litigation or engage in litigation to uphold their rights. You know, that's the problem. I would say.
Well, so I guess you kind of answered my next question, which is, you know, when challenged legally, all of these allegations are completely debunked and shown to be false. But it shouldn't be the case that, you know, you have to go through the legal process to basically say what is protected speech under any European legal system. You should have the right to criticize Zionism, criticize Israel. That's protected speech. But to protect that, you need, you know, no other community feels they need to go to court to protect that. And you kind of answered that question yourself.
No, yeah. But I just want to add a few things here where, I mean, it's not just a matter of the court. I mean, yeah, of course, court can protect your rights. But here we are also talking about your public reputation and the narrative. In Germany, all the time we went to court with our amazing lawyer, Ahmed Aved, for challenging the anti-BDS motion, and we won all the time. We didn't have not even one German newspaper covering the news, not even one. So the smear of anti-Semitism is all over the media. When you go to court and you win, no one will cover it. So okay, great, like you won, which is important, but the strain remain on you. This in our opinion is really the problem. And then of course, like the time, the resources, it takes a huge courage for deciding to challenge these attacks. Yeah. I think like we're really proud to support, like there are a group of amazing women we supported, like Wala Al-Qassia, Farah Maraka, editor journalist of Deutsche Welle, Anna Younes in Germany. Anna Younes, Anna Younes was invited to an event, in Germany, to speak about anti-racism by the Die Linke, German political party, and then she was disinvited the day before. And then she found out that she was disinvited because an organization called RIAS, which is an organization that monitors anti-Semitic incidents, this organization used the IHRA as the parameter for tracking anti-Semitic incidents. This organization, they made a dossier on her, a secret dossier. They tracked her academic publication, her social media posts, and we had these 2 pages dossier, copy-pasting stuff she wrote, and framing her as an anti-Semite, and that's why she was disinvited. Well, she sued them for violating her privacy. She won. Now we are undergoing the appeal, but in the first instance, she won partially. And again, it takes a huge, you need to be very brave and committed to fight this, you know, especially in countries, I would say, as Germany and Austria, where of course the media are definitely not sympathetic about this. And yeah, with the judges, it's a flip of a coin. I mean, of course, we think we're strong in our arguments, absolutely, but it's still difficult. It's really difficult, I would say, and that's the chilling effect. That's why, you know.
Look, just numbers. You mentioned 56. I'm assuming that's just tip of the iceberg. I mean, you're a legal center, and I'm assuming you get a lot of complaints and a lot of people coming forward, seeking support and assistance over smear campaign because of smear campaigns. So what's the actual size and the number of people that you have on your database that have been smeared? Because that's 56 probably is not the end of the story. I'm sure there's lots more.
I can disclose more. I would say hundreds. We have hundreds of cases, really hundreds. We don't have enough capacity, unfortunately, to support all of them, but we're literally tracking hundreds of incidents, and we receive requests of legal support on, I would say, weekly basis. So it's actually a lot. We selected the cases that for us were most relevant, but there is much.
And that's all across Europe. That's all over.
Yeah, this is all over Europe. Yeah, we're talking about mainly UK, Germany, I would say, but all over Europe. UK and Germany and Austria are the places where the IHRA has been implemented mostly. Like now also Italy just developed a strategy on anti-Semitism, and now we're seeing more cases there as well. Mainly all over Europe. No, indeed, and also we really like push and invite people to report incidents to us, because again, this is what the chilling effect is about, right? Like chilling effect is when people are facing these incidents, facing the attacks, they are so afraid, so scared, they don't want to speak out anymore. Like the main message would be, it's absolutely possible to push back. There is a strong solidarity network and also legal support when needed, and it's crucial to speak out, because if people don't speak out, the conversation is over. I would say no one will know about this, and this institution, the European, they will keep implementing IHRA, implementing these policies. So if we want to stop this, we need to speak out, denounce this, and fight back. Because again, fight back is absolutely possible and necessary. And most of the time we are successful, which is a really good sign, I would say.
Yeah, so just lastly, before we finish, so what are the recommendations to the European Union and to the countries that have adopted the IHRA? What is your main message?
The main message would be, I mean, of course, to stop and revert the implementation adoption of the IHRA. If you're not ready to do that, at least to start a proper human rights assessment before, I mean, our recommendation would be, let's do a community assessment before adopting this resolution. Let's include also the communities that are mostly affected by this. So it's important actually to do a proper human rights assessment before implementing. So our suggestion would be, okay, stop and revert the implementation, but if not, to suspend it, do a proper assessment, and then take the proper conclusions and considerations. These are our main recommendation to European Commission and to the member states. Yeah.
Yes, we have come to the end of our time, Giovanni. I mean, I really enjoyed having this conversation. I think, and thank you for shedding light on this really important topic. We hear about it every single week, if not day, one case or another about this person being smeared, and all the time it goes back to the IHRA, and it's really having the chilling effect. And I guess that is the purpose that it was intended for. I'm sure we will speak again, because your work is ongoing, and I'm sure you'll produce more reports on this issue, highlighting the impact it's having on pro-Palestinian activists and critics of Israel, and generally just undermining the values which Europe is supposed to be standing for: free speech, free expression. These are supposed to be criticizing political ideology is supposed to be a protected speech, but you know, there we have it. So thank you, and I want to thank those who have tuned in as well, and see you in another conversation with the Middle East Monitor. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much again. Bye.